Welcome to Tips Over Tea. This is season 2. I am so thrilled to have the opportunity to have great conversations with some amazing people. And I have the opportunity to hang out with you guys again, my guests. Make sure you have your tea, whether it be hot or cold, for the Tips Over Tea. And make sure you have your notebook so you can take plenty of notes. And if you're so inclined, bring a friend or two to join you. For now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Tips Over Tea. I'm so excited to introduce you to Jonathan Adams, a.k.a. Sonic Yogi. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Guys, I just wanted to share. I found Jonathan through Insight Timer. It's the app that I use when I'm meditating. And his music, like, I've listened to many artists and there's nothing wrong with them, but his music just drew me to him. And I was like, I reached out and I'm so honored that you said yes to being able to come on the show and have a conversation with me. So thank you for that.
Thank you. My pleasure.
You're welcome. So as I was learning a little more about you, you were kind of giving an idea of how you ended up composing music for yourself, and it was to help you deal with an anxiety. Is that right? Could you give us like kind of how did all that transpire? Like, how did you go from being anxious and then move into music as part of, the healing process?
hmm Well, at the time, I was touring as a musician. Um, I went to school for music and studied classical guitar, and then started a group. And I was touring with a cellist, and we played, like classical crossover music.
Mm,
And played in, small art centers and things like that. Anyway, in the course of trying to navigate that career, um, I started to have anxiety, um, and so for me, that anxiety was not just like a mental anxiety; it was also a physical anxiety. Sometimes I wouldn't even know mentally why I was so stressed, but my body would, my heart would start beating, and that shortness of breath and those kinds of things, and I would essentially have a panic attack, and that's eventually how it developed. I began to have more and more of these panic attacks that would be basically debilitating,
yeah.
um, and and then that causes an anxiety of its own, because then you're wondering, when is this going to happen? Is it going to happen when I'm in public, or when I'm
Hmm.
visiting with someone, or anything like that. So it kind of spins off into this feedback loop of a greater anxiety. So that was happening in my um, 30s,
Hmm.
um, and through that, I this is a little bit of a longer story, but I'm going to try to keep it short. I started to look at ways to basically help myself with that anxiety.
Yeah.
And I really didn't understand the source of it at that time.
Yeah.
Um, a couple of those larger panic attacks, I had even gone to the emergency room. Uh,
Hmm.
and through that, then I went to the general doctor and things, um, and got various opinions about it. But overall, I just knew that I needed to change my lifestyle, and I
Yeah.
needed to change my habits. And so, I knew that it was related somewhat to digestive issues, because I was having a lot of acid reflux at the time.
Hmm.
So I quit drinking alcohol. I basically quit eating sugars. I started changing my diet, um, and then I also joined a yoga class at the local gym, and
Nice.
um, and it looks super relaxing. And I thought, I'm going to give that a try, and I really loved it. It after each class, I would almost feel like this euphoric kind of high because my body was so relaxed. And it was like my body had been stressed out for so long with this anxiety that I almost didn't know what to do with feeling good. But it felt really nice. And I would say over the course of a couple of years, with all of the diet changes, lifestyle changes, the yoga, that I started to feel quite a bit better. And there was still some issues. But then after that couple of years, then I had a time where a lot of anxiety came back up again. And that is what I would refer to now as my awakening experience, because that awakening forced me to do an inventory of my own psyche, essentially. And at the same time, my body was releasing a lot of really deeply held stresses. So that actually lasted for the intense part was about a week. But the overall experience was several weeks. And then on the other side of that experience was a lot of bliss, joy, and euphoria, basically, because I had released all of those stresses. And that's lasted for maybe another 2 years of really just surrendering to that energy. But all of that brought me from kind of treading the path of looking at music as entertainment to seeing it as a healing force. In the deepest part of that anxiety, I was reaching out to everyone I knew that I thought might help. I was reaching out to therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists. I reached out to a man who was a promoter, and his wife did Reiki and all of these things. And I just had some intuitive feeling like this was energetic, and I wasn't really well versed in all of these things back then. But I reached out to her and I asked, basically, can you help me? And she said, well, I'm not really doing sessions right now, but she recommended this music. So she sent me some recordings. And there was also happened to be a sound healing conference in a few weeks. I listened to those recordings, and it really, I don't know if it was because of the open state I was in, but it just took my brainwaves from like stressed down to a very meditative state very quickly. And my whole body was able to relax. My muscles relaxed, my breathing relaxed, and I just felt so much better. And it started to show me that basically our nervous system and our senses are based on frequency. And the learning process there for me internally was beginning to just pay attention to the way I think, the way I perceive, and how that's going to affect essentially what we call, in popular culture, our vibration. But essentially that's what it is every perception, every thought has an effect on the nervous system. And so I began to just pay attention to that very closely. And that was really, I guess, in a nutshell, part of the healing process is just learning to notice.
I love that, learning to notice. And that is so true. And you've said so many things that I could like go on a whole other tangent, another show on. I'm curious, like as you were like the first time you were experiencing that extreme anxiety and you allowed yourself, like you released, you allowed, you didn't try to run from it, kind of because your body wouldn't let you. But um, before you became conscious of your thoughts, during that time, how was your mind going? Was it like, why is this happening? Was it questioning, or was it more like, I need to do, like, what were you thinking? Because I'm just like, if someone's gonna like self-identify, I get anxiety and things like that. What am I supposed to do when I have a panic attack, or what if I don't have music? What was it that you feel like brought you to a place where you can move beyond that point?
Um, and well, I think in general, so let me clarify something. Are you
Sure.
asking about like the panic attacks before or that deeper anxiety that I had mentioned? Because I
Yeah,
look at
go
it a little differently, but
ahead. Okay, actually, share about both because I'm
okay.
sure when someone watches, they can, yeah, it'll help either way.
Sure. Well, I would say the culmination of the deeper anxiety that I mentioned after the 2 years of yoga
Hmm.
um, was much deeper dive into my own psyche and quite a bit psychedelic, I would say.
Hmm.
Um, and I think it was in that learning process that I learned to um, tap into the calm of my mind. And so there are two parts to this, but in that process, I felt like, so imagine my mind was like this swirling hurricane, and all of these thoughts were like on number 11. And
Hmm.
so like I was having negative thoughts about myself, like every negative thought you can think of. You're such a loser, your life sucks, and my mind was just attacking me with all of these thoughts.
Hmm.
And but somewhere behind that was this calm.
Yes.
And in that storm, the calm also became a little bit more noticeable. So I pulled back into the calm and just allowed the storm to happen. So it was like my mind was still doing its thing out here,
Yeah.
but I was able to sort of retreat back into this place of calm.
I love that.
Now, I think that in that particular deep experience, my that was like a gift basically from the divine or whatever to
Yeah.
allow me. So I would separate that from just the everyday panic attack. And in the everyday panic attack, um, may be a little bit harder to manage in some ways.
Hmm.
But I would say to anyone experiencing that for my experience, I've noticed two things. There's the physiological part of it, and then
Hmm.
there's the mental part of it.
Hmm.
And I think they go together and influence each other. And so for the physiological part, um, I began to, as I mentioned, I changed my diet, but I began to look at things to heal my gut
Hmm.
and things like probiotics and things to cleanse out the bad bacteria.
Hmm.
Um, and so that was a process for me. But as I began to heal that, as you may know, and a lot of listeners may know, that a lot of our brain chemicals like serotonin and things are produced in the gut.
Yeah.
Um, However, in that healing process, sometimes it gets worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
Um, and so I was learning about that at the same time I was implementing these changes.
Hmm.
And so I knew that my physiology needed to basically recalibrate my nervous system. And
Hmm.
so my gut was recalibrating through yoga and the yoga practice, I was recalibrating the physiology.
Hmm.
Um, and so that was a component of it. And then I would say when I had that deeper experience, that was sort of my introduction to understanding how my mental self and the psychological part of it fits into it. And it forced me to begin to inventory my perceptions and my identity, essentially, and understand how I was actually creating a lot of my own stress through my own ignorance and my own lack of being mindful about what I was doing to myself.
I love that because a lot of times, it's the habit of a lot of people, they don't recognize that it's coming from within, so to speak. It's because what happens is, at least I believe, the um, the deeply rooted stresses and traumas and things like that. Sometimes they get to a boiling point, and then something outside of themselves will allow that to be released, and it'll feel like it's that thing that's releasing it, but really it's your body trying to release it itself, and it's just like generating situations that'll help it get out of
Mhm,
it. So I appreciate that you recognize that you play a huge role in navigating those and getting those situations to a place where they are not being debilitating and you can take a step back. That was such a beautiful visual that you mentioned too. Like the storm was still going, but I was just standing back here watching it. um, Yoga and meditation will definitely help learn how to do that for sure. Um, and I know before we started recording, we were talking about like one of my favorite pieces of yours. Um, One, I love guitar, and then I also love the bass aspect of in pieces. And your music has that, and it's just really grounding. What how because your music is very different from most meditation music, right? Like it's
mhm.
usually so. How are you drawn to that style of music for the healing purposes?
Um,
Or is it kind of similar to where you work with because you said cello, I would love to have heard that cello and guitar. So
mhm.
I'd like to hear more about that.
Yeah. Um, so I think when I had that deeper sort of anxiety/awakening, I began to look at sound and frequency differently, in
Mm,
that just as I was sort of noticing my thoughts and how those affected my nervous system, I started to notice vibration.
mm,
And the first thing I did was I would started like humming and singing to myself and noticing how certain tones would really help me to feel better.
mm,
It was almost like humming certain tones immediately sort of brought up those good brain chemicals, and I would feel very calm.
yeah,
Um, and then that led me to noticing other tones. Um, and eventually I found the singing bowls, which did a similar thing of helping me find that feeling.
mhm,
Um, so I started to create some of these meditation tracks, using nature sounds and singing bowls.
mhm,
And the initial intention was for not only to use myself to sort of have something to go to, but to share with family and friends.
yeah,
And coming out of that experience was so profound in my realization of what is possible with our body and how good we can feel and how we can live in harmony and love and respect with each other, that of course I wanted to share that with family and friends. And we all have things to heal in our families, I think,
yeah,
probably.
yes.
And that was the initial sort of healing impetus for me. Was I wanted to heal my family. I wanted to heal my relationships. And I knew that that had something to do with healing our nervous system.
Mhm,
So we weren't fighting this imaginary enemy amongst each other.
mm,
Um, And so I felt like these vibrations were a way to communicate that in a way that can't be communicated with words. So I think in the music I began to create, I just began to seek that and um, really search for it in my own creation, if that makes sense.
It does.
And so yeah, so each creation to me was also a meditation and an exploration and allowing myself to do something that from my musical training was way out in left field, you know? And
Mhm.
I thought, well, not only did I think I had maybe gone crazy in this sort of awakening experience, but I thought maybe I'm crazy making up this crazy music, but it felt so good, I wanted to keep doing it.
Well, I'm glad.
Um,
It just the way you kind of described just now. So I'm getting my master's in consciousness and human potential, and in reading about consciousness, it's really hard to like conceptualize it because it's such an abstract concept. But as I'm reading it, I feel it. And so,
mhm,
like, as you were describing your music to be able to communicate, just not through words, but through vibrations, what you're saying, like, it's your voice. And that's what I love about it because it's your music, is your voice. It's what you're pouring from your heart and your nervous system. This is what I want for you. I just like really liked how you described that. It's very poetic.
thank you.
You're welcome. Um, so what I was gonna, it just fell out of my head. What I was gonna say. What tips would you have for someone who is starting their healing journey? You talked about you changed your diet, you've added the music to it. How often do you meditate? Do you still do yoga? Like, what would be your protocol? Like, if you were going to prescribe someone a protocol to like reduce their anxiety or stress and things like that, what would you suggest?
Um, I think that what I've learned is that everything affects everything else.
Yeah.
And so diet plays a part, with all of those gut bacteria, and so much of that's coming out in science in
Hmm.
these days.
Hmm.
But yoga is really important in my view. Meditation has become very important.
Hmm.
So I meditate now twice a day.
Hmm.
Um, and I try to do the physical asana a few times a week, the yoga practice. Um, I pay attention to my diet, in terms of um, encouraging those good bacteria that produce those good brain chemicals.
Yeah.
Um, and so I read a book called The Body Ecology Diet, which was good. And there are many books out there these days about um, the gut and gut healing.
Yeah.
But I would say for anybody with anxiety, that would be a major that tends to be a major key.
Mhm.
Over these many years, I've talked to a lot of people
Mhm.
that have anxiety, and it seems to be a very much a common denominator. Um, but so for me, it's yoga, meditation, and just life. And you know, ultimately, I think that our nervous systems are designed for love and connection.
Mhm.
And um, a lot of times we have barriers within ourselves to that.
Yes.
Um, and so a lot of these practices, I think, are ultimately pointing to how can I be a more loving, responsible being, you
Yeah.
know, and we all, I think, want that. We desire connection. We desire safety and respect.
Mhm.
And I think the question is in all of these things, how can I give that as well?
Yeah.
And it's just an ongoing journey, I think, you know, so that's kind of what I work on every day is I try to not only calm my nervous system through these things, but it also teaches me, and I find myself journaling a lot or coming
Mhm.
to epiphanies about my own behavior,
Mhm.
things that I want to be more mindful about or notice, you know, within other people and their communication and those kinds of things. So it's just a constant journey of noticing, I think.
Yeah. I would say that is an underlying theme. Um, and I love that you said connection because I was like, if you didn't say that, I was going to add it. It does matter. That is something I did not do early on in my life, and so once I began to heal myself, I recognized how important having connections with people, loved ones, friends, really is, and that they can just. I remember which book it is, but it was talking about how just having someone next to you when you're not feeling well can help heal you, like start the healing process.
Mhm,
So it really is like energetically, physically, mentally important to have some form of connection with people who care about you and love you.
mhm.
So I love that you brought that up, and I definitely agree with diet, lifestyle choices, and it is a process journey. Like it's not a I need to fix this. Let's get it like life is gonna life. um, so I definitely appreciate and agree with the tips that you've shared with the audience.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm thrilled to have your information in a description so that people can reach out and connect with you through your music. Um, I yeah, I love it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there any so because like it's already 26 minutes, almost 27. Is there any last thoughts or questions I didn't ask that you think would be very important for people to consider? And then also just let people know how they can connect with you.
Um, well, I'm not sure. I think, you know, everybody's probably coming from such a different
Yeah.
place in their journey. Um, and I think probably if they're listening and they're on this journey, that there's someone that wants to, you know, they're trying actively to do their best in all
Mhm,
of these areas.
mhm,
And so I would say to them, um, just keep doing your best. Sometimes it's two steps forward and one step back.
mhm,
And sometimes it can feel like a struggle, but, you know, I think it's worth it. And just continue to do your best and be open to learning along the way and to be guided by the universe. Ask the universe to guide you
yeah,
and trust in it. And so that's all I guess I would say maybe. Um, and then as far as finding my music, I have a website, sonicyogi.com. I'm
mhm.
also on Spotify and other services under Sonic Yogi.
Awesome. I love it. Such a perfect name. And actually, you know what? Something came to mind as you're reminding people that being open. When you were describing earlier, um, on the other side of part of that healing, and you felt like lighter and more free, that is one of the things just in conversing with people. They're afraid to go through it because they don't know how they're going to respond as they're going through it. Like that can be scary. So I
Mhm,
appreciate that you went through it. I've gone through it, and that's not necessarily the last time. Like things still lives.
mhm,
But just as a reminder that he shows proof, and going through it on the other side is this a feeling that you cannot. It's not easy to describe. It's something that you just feel.
mhm.
So I do want to just encourage um, anyone who is like facing these challenges to just go through it and then add Jonathan's music to your journey. It will help.
Yeah, totally. That was also a lot of my intention, is just to have this music be like sort of a balm when you're going through the worst times.
Yeah.
And so if that speaks to anyone, and I hope it's helpful.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be, or it is. So it has been beautiful for me during my meditative practice, that's for sure. So
Awesome.
awesome. Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed learning more about you, how you navigated those waters, and I know that your story is inspiring to others to help them to realize like anxiety is a thing. There's a way to address it, and it doesn't have to be meds. It can be like music is the vibrational frequency and energy behind it is very powerful. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you, and thank you for what you do.
Thank you. You're welcome. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a great conversation with Jonathan Sonic Yogi, and I look forward to seeing you again next week with another great conversation and more tips for your health. Till next time, ciao for now. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Hope you enjoyed the show and got a lot of good information. Be sure to like, subscribe, tap the bell so you know when we air again. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Enjoy the rest of your week.